What is up, guys? Christian here with Tech Blog. Today we're going to build something amazing. You guys are going to love it. It is a Amazon scraping tool. Yes, that's right. I know you guys were all waiting for this. Basically, if you got reviews on one of your Amazon, now you want to embed it. Now you got a great website that you built. You want to embed all your great reviews. This is a tool for you guys to do that. Bezos is going to love it. You're going to love it. Check it out.
We're back. We're on Amazon. So we're checking out this beautiful laptop stand. So what we're going to do is say that you own this product and now you just build this brand new Shopify site and you want to take this laptop stand and you want to take the reviews because reviews are great for establishing rapport with clients and showing that you are an established vendor. So we want to take the reviews. We have 5,300 customer ratings and we want to put them on your new Shopify site. Unfortunately, Amazon, they're so nice over there, don't give us a public-facing API in order to do that easily. So what we have to do as resourceful developers or people who are learning to be developers, we actually want to build out our own API to sort of take all of these reviews, all these great reviews, people like my guy Jeff, maybe this is Bezos himself, and embed it on our own site, right? So what do we want to do? We want to take maybe the name, we want to take the number of stars, title, body, of course, and maybe these images as well. I found for myself that it varies based on the structure of each page because each page is going to be built out differently. So you sort of got to get your own play and feel for each. What I found was clicking on that site, looking at these all reviews on this URL is the best URL because it lists out all of the reviews on a single page. And then we have a single button which allows you to navigate between all the pages. So in this case, there's going to be 9 pages total. And what we want to do is we want to build out some piece of technology that will allow us to navigate between all the pages, take all of the reviews, and output it to a CSV file. And of course, we're going to have to understand the page structure. So we're going to have to understand how are we going to categorize this review as being different from this review. So what we could do is essentially have an array of objects and export each individual object into a CSV. I know that sounds like a bunch of mumbo jumbo, but you guys are going to love it. You're going to see it done very quickly. So Scrappy. The reason why I love Scrappy is because Scrappy, you can use a Scrappy shell. And within this shell, it allows you to sort of debug what the response from a page is, right? So if I request Amazon.com, the server is going to send me out an HTML.index. It's going to send me out other things too, like other media and maybe some JavaScript, but it's going to send me out this HTML file, and that's what's going to render on the page. So from there, I would like to navigate the page structure and extract things. Maybe in this case, we want to extract the title. Scrappy provides 2 different methods to doing that. It might provide CSS selectors, and it will provide XPath. You can see sort of CSS references here. You might be able to select all elements, all p tags with elements class of intro. So more simple stuff here, but you can check this out, documentation here. XPath is something where we might want to use some better functionality. For example, we might want to use a function, this isn't listed here, but we might, yes it is. So a function like contains, for example. So this, if you guys are familiar with SQL, get me all the buttons where text, so the text of the button, contains the phrase go. So that's another way to do it. And of course, we see parallels between CSS and XPath, but we're going to use XPath because it's a little bit more configurable. So, okay, that's great. Let's get right into it. So we're going to go and set up a Scrappy project. So we're going to say Scrappy, start project, and we're going to call it Awesome Bezos. Okay. Awesome Bezos. I'm going to spell that correctly. Okay, great. Whew. Spiders. What kind of web are we talking about? Okay, great. So we're going to CD into Awesome Bezos just for shits and giggles. Okay, great. So we're going to look at what each of these functions, or rather each of these files, what they do. So what is an item? So whenever we export something from Scrappy, it's going to be exported as a dictionary, okay? Every single item is going to be exported as a dictionary. What you could do is you could maybe define a item. An item is essentially a class, and it provides some sort of structure behind what you are exporting. If we look at items real quickly, for example, say that we had a product, right? A product might have a name, price, stock. So this allows us, so whenever we export one of these dictionary items, okay, we have to have all of these fields mandatory, and it'll export it accordingly. So if you are working with a large number of spiders, a large amount of data, you might want to define some items just to sort of clean up everything. We're not going to do that in this case. Middleware. So what are middlewares? Essentially, when Scrappy parses a page, we're going to feed it something called a URL, right? We're going to feed it a list of start URLs. So if we look at, let's create a spider right now. So we're going to call this, actually what we're going to do is we're going to generate a spider. So we're going to go Scrappy gen spider Amazon with a base URL of amazon.com, which we're going to change. Okay, great. We go here, okay? So here we have start URLs. So what this is going to be is say that we were to run this spider not just on one URL, but multiple URLs. Think of Google, right, doing a broad crawl. They have maybe a series of start URLs, and from there, the spider is going to find all of the maybe URLs that are on a certain page, parse those, and it's going to keep going, right? So you might define several different start URLs, right? We might have amazon.com, we might have another URL.com, might have another URL, another, if I could spell another, URL.com. And what if we were to build a concurrent program, which means that we might have 3 different spiders running at the same time, right? One will be hitting up this URL, one will be hitting up this one will be hitting up this one. So essentially we would partition the load so that these spiders would run faster, right? Because maybe in this case, we only have 9 pages to crawl, but what if you had 1,000,000 pages to crawl? What you could do is instead of having one spider crawl all those pages, you could have, one spider crawling 10,000, another one crawling 10,000. You could sort of break it up so that the overall process is quicker. And assuming that you had a big server with multiple different processors, then you could, logical units, you could then sort of break it up into a multi-threaded program, and the program would run much quicker. So what middlewares does is whenever we were to export an item, we can export multiple things, but whenever we are to export an item, something that we want parsed, it's going to run through a middleware first. And the middleware will sort of take it, and it'll be the first stop to seeing the data. In this case, by default, Scrappy has a couple of middlewares configured, so we probably won't have to touch them. But for example, it might have page depth. So in Amazon, right, we might consider this page to be page depth 0, whereas if we were on page 9, that might be page depth 9. So what might happen is every time that Scrappy returns a response object, or simply an object that will allow it to crawl to another page, we might want to increment some variable that we have on the process, which allows us to track, okay, how far into a page structure we are. And maybe we don't want to crawl 9 pages. Maybe we want to just crawl 5. So it would allow us to say, okay, if you're over 5 pages, then you have to stop crawling. So that might be a use case for middleware. Essentially, it allows you to see data or see anything returned from your spider before it hits the pipeline. The pipeline is where you then format your item into the various different storage units which you might want to integrate with. Scrappy is really cool because you can use the CLI to export data directly to a CSV file, to a JSON file, a JSON lines file, or if you want to get fancy, you can integrate a pipeline, and the pipeline might allow you to export to a MongoDB database, for example, or export to a database. You could then store a bunch of spiders on a scraping cloud and then continually update your database with data that you found from your various spiders. For example, say that you were monitoring in this case, in times of coronavirus, say that you were monitoring the John Hopkins coronavirus research page and you wanted to update your public-facing page, which displays the information in various graphs. Then maybe you would have these spiders running on a Scrappy Cloud. They would be operated on a cron job, and they would essentially scrape the data, put it into your database, and that would be happening, maybe every day at midnight. So it'll allow you to sort of set up that interaction between, okay, this is the data, and this is how we're going to store it. Next thing is settings. Settings, we can define various things like, are we going to obey robots.txt? In this case, we're not, because Amazon doesn't like people scraping their sites. Very interesting. Concurrent requests, so like I was talking about before, since we have this start URLs list, we could make multiple requests at a given time. So how many do we want to do concurrently? Do we need a download delay and auto throttling? So what that means is if we were to have, say, it's not that bad in our case because we only have 9 pages, but say that, again, we wanted to scrape all of Amazon's pages, right? And we implemented multiple different spiders. That would be really, really a lot of strain on their servers, and they would probably just block us for too many requests. I think it's I forgot which error it is, but it's essentially, I think it's like a 429 error. But essentially that means that you have done too many requests in a certain amount of time. So you are an asshole at this point. Everyone thinks that default request headers, we're going to have to use this because Amazon doesn't like it when there is no user agent, because it determines us to be a bot, and sites, big sites at least, like Amazon, don't want bots scraping their site. We can then configure things like middleware, so Spider middlewares, downloader middlewares, extensions. We don't really need any of that. Again, if you want to implement your own custom middlewares, you can totally do that in the middlewares file. Because the function that we're returning from, this parse function, is a generator function, which means it's going to be not returning, but yielding. And it might either yield an item or it'll yield a response.follow object. And if it yields a response.follow object, then the middleware might want to take it and might want to do some processing on it. But in our case, we're not. So item pipeline, we don't necessarily need a pipeline because by default, it's just going to return the item. So we're fine there. And yeah, that should be good. So we're going to go into spiders. And we're not going to start URLs. We only need one, because we're going to start from one URL, and we're going to then, using that URL, we're going to go through the various pages. So allow domains, we don't need that. What we're going to do is we're going to take this URL that we want, plop it in there. Okay, we're getting somewhere, guys. Hope you're all doing well. Maybe this is the point where I should sell you something like some fancy water that'll make you extra smart. Okay, Scrappy shell. And what are we going to do? We're just getting really scrappy here, guys. Okay, and boom. So what's it going to do? It's going to say, hey, Bezos, we're here. Welcome. Let's roll with the welcome wagon. So we could maybe review the response object. Okay, ooh, there's a response, right? So that's just an object that doesn't actually, just says that we have a status code 200. It doesn't actually give us any of the HTML response, which makes sense because there'd be a lot of information on that page. So this is where we should probably look at the structure of the page a little bit. So what we're going to do is we're going to say we go to our guy Jeff here, right? And we're going to sort of, we're going to maximize, we're going to expect, so we're going to see what the page looks like, right? Every single page is configured differently. The good thing about Amazon is that they don't change their page structure very often, right? So this code is likely going to work for you for a long time. So the way that Amazon sort of built this page is if we just sort of inspect this specific one, we can kind of see that, okay, we have this sort of parent div here, and it contains all of the various comments. Okay, that's good to know. That means that it's very clean and everything is very structured here. What we're doing is sort of easy to structure, but say that we were to, on a very big page, extract a couple different fields, and those fields, maybe the page gets updated frequently, and there is no consistent underlying structure. That's very difficult to parse. But in our case, it's pretty easy, right? We have this, we have this certain parent div. Within it, we have, okay, so there's some child objects. So there's some divs which we don't really need to consider. But, okay, great. Then now we have, okay, so basically all of the children of this customer review div are information that we might need, right? We might want the style, color, verified purchase, and we can see that it's all listed as text under these various divs, okay? And you might want the images as well. The images, however, we're going to do a little differently because we have to get the source of an image tag. But for now, we're basically just looking through all text, which is pretty good, okay? So great. So in that case, we essentially can view this page as an array of objects, right? Here's an object, this customer review, and then we want to get all of the text of all of the children. Okay, great. And we're going to do that with all of these divs. So what we want to do is we might want to sort of use a selector, right, an XPath selector to say, okay, get me all of the divs with ID containing customer review, right? Because we have this random string here, and this random string, I don't know how it's generated, and I don't know how often it changes, and it's different for every single div, but what does remain consistent is this customer review part. So we want the ID to contain that. So what we're going to do is we're going to say, just to sort of see how this looks. So we're going to say response. Yeah. So we're going to say response.xpath. Okay. // So we're going to be looking at a div, and here is our SQL. So contains. So where ID is equal to customer reviews, or review rather. Okay, great. And get that, see what it says. Okay, so we get selectors. Selectors are great. But let's say, just for curiosity, we are going to integrate through each of these selectors individually and get the information on a selector basis, and then essentially yield a dictionary containing all of the fields which we want, like reviewer name, rating, review title. But for now, why don't we just get everything as one big list, combined list? So how are we going to do that? Well, we want to get all the divs containing an ID containing customer review, but then we want to say, okay, within that, let's get all of the children, and then let's get all of the text. And let's extract that. Okay? Great. So now we got a lot of information. It's looking better. We see all the text, but we see a lot of junk in it. Let's go side by side with some of the information that we're seeing here. So let's sort of scroll up. Let's find our guy, Jeff. Okay, so we have Jeff, 5 out of 5 stars, a bunch of black backslashes, and great MacBook Pro stand. So we see, it's going to be different based on how you decide to extract information from every page. There's lots of different ways to do this. But in our case, we notice that all of the elements that have essentially, that are garbage to us, that we don't want, have /ns. Now that might not be the case for every page, and certainly I believe it won't be, right? Because there could be good data that might also have a new line character at the end. But in our case, it seems like all of these, just from an initial glance, an initial hypothesis, and that's what's good about the Scrappy shell, is that you can sort of see what the data looks like and adjust that accordingly, right? So yeah, we want this. So that's my initial hypothesis, is that we don't want any elements in that list that contain a /n. Okay? So how are we going to do that? Well, we're going to use a filter function. Filter function is something where the first argument is going to be a function, the second argument is going to be a list. So every time that the function returns true, that particular element of the list, and the filter function acts as a for each sort of iterable in say JavaScript, for example, it's going to either return it if that function returns true, it's going to add it to the output list. If not, it's going to cut it out. So we're going to filter. We're going to declare a lambda function. Lambda means that it's a function that does not have a name, so it is a very sad function. I would not want to be that function because I like my name. So we're going to use re.search. A regular expression allows you to sort of search within a string. It's very powerful. Allows you to do some very well-refined searches, but in our case, it's actually going to be quite simple. So it sort of is similar to maybe a JavaScript.find method, the way that we're using it, but JavaScript also has regular expressions. So in our case, we want it so that anything that re.search will return an object if it does find sort of the \n within this string, which means that it's going to be truthy, and therefore we don't want any of those elements in, so we're going to not it. And just from my previous experience with this data, we also want there's a certain, see, this data is quite weird in the sense that most of the time it's well structured, except in cases where, and let's see if we can find it. I'm not sure if we can find it on this page. But every once in a while, we're going to see that this person might be listed as a top contributor. And if they're a top contributor, that's going to throw off the structure of how we're exporting the list, and it's going to make all of the data very wonky in the CSV. So you basically have to go through all of your data and make sure that all of the structure is consistent. Let me see if I can find it. Going to look through a couple more to see if I can find it, but likely, yes, top 500 reviewer, right? So this is going to be another list field which we might not be accounting for, and in this case we don't really care that they're a top 500 reviewer, so we're actually going to remove this field from our output CSV file because it's going to throw off how we're structuring everything. So if we see top contributor, then we don't want it. Sorry, we don't care. It's not that cool, honestly, really isn't. You should probably do something else besides commenting on Amazon all day. Okay, great. So now we have to input the second argument to the lambda function is going to be the actual array itself. So exactly what we just wrote before. So response .xpath. Okay. Get me the divs, all of them. Nope, not all of them. I lied. That contain money. No, ID. That contain customer reviews. No, review. Christian, you're failing miserably. Okay. Okay, great. Dot extract. Okay, great. Re is not defined. Fix that. Aha. So, I forgot something. Nice. Okay, great. So there it is. Okay, so what we're going to do here is we're going to look at, okay, how does this look? Look at all this nice data. Wow, Christian, that really worked well. Okay, so now we're going to go back to Jeff, our guy. He's fantastic. Oh, where's Jeff? Jeffrey Bezos. Okay, it doesn't really matter. But say that, okay, in this case, let's go with JC here. So we have name, 5 out of 5 stars. Okay, great. We got title. His title's going to be different. Reviewed. Okay, we got style, colored, verified purchase. All that stuff is great. And we have the body. That's fantastic. After that, we have the number of people that found it helpful, Unfortunately, Jeff's comment was better than JC. Sorry, JC, your comment stinks. And then we got all this garbage, which we don't necessarily want because we don't really care if people are commenting. We might, but in this case, we don't. So in this case, and we see that the next comment starts over here. So in this case, we have a bunch of garbage after I believe this is the 9th element in the list. But before that, everything is good stuff. So we want to take everything up until the 9th element of the list. So we'll keep that in mind. So what we're going to do now is the parse method is automatically called as a callback whenever Scrappy yields a response object, and the response object has a URL to crawl. So by default, we start with start URLs, and that's how that is going to be the default response object for this spider. So what we're going to do is we're going to start off by saying the number of sections is equal to 9. So we know that from the title or the name of the person up to the up into the upvotes, that is going to be 9 sections total. Okay? So, okay, great. So what are we going to do now? The next thing that we're going to do is we're going to define a couple of different things. So we're going to say reviews, right? We want to get that array of selectors, which is the customer review divs, okay? Response.xpath. Okay, So we're going to go div contains. What does it contain? Money. No, it doesn't. Oh, sorry. This stinks. Can't believe there's no money in this customer review. Okay, great. Next thing we're going to do is we're going to define an export list. This is going to be the 9 fields that we're going to be exporting, right? So the first element on the list might be the person's name. The second element might be the rating that they gave and the review title. Following that, we're going to define the export headers. This is going to be important because when we export to a CSV file, Scrappy is going to take care of a lot of the heavy lifting for us, but it's actually a lot easier for us if we define it as a key value pair where the exported item is a key value where we have reviewer name, Jeff, rating, 5 out of 5 stars, for example. So that allows the CSV file to know which value corresponds to which column. And it just sort of standard practice for Scrappy, which makes it a lot easier to sort of deal with CSV files. So product color. And I mean, what else? What else are we taking? Product color. We might call it something like verified purchased or verification status. Sure. Okay. Maybe we'll say review, body. And the next thing we might do is we might say sort of upvotes, how helpful we think everything is. And we're also going to throw image source in. So image source is going to be, in the case that it does include an image, we're going to have a value for that. If not, just so that it can be a column name in the CSV file. Otherwise, it won't be. Okay, great. And the export dictionary, that's just going to be an empty dictionary. And that's just going to be the item that we actually end up exporting. Okay, great. So for review, in reviews, we're going to iterate through the selectors. We are going to use the great function that we just wrote out. So let me just copy that. Okay. Okay, great. Now the next thing to consider is, first of all, we don't want to do it on the full response because that's going to be the full HTML body. but we want to use review. And this is where we're going to use a relative XPath configuration. So we're going to say on the reviews, so on the reviews, we're going to, since we haven't extracted anything yet, we can actually continue breaking down further into the selector. So we're going to use a dot, and then we're going to go into the child. We're going to get all of the children, and then we're going to get the text, and then extract that. So it's going to be on a per review basis. And what that allows us to do is that allows us to configure, okay, sort of segment or partition all of the reviews. And it's going to allow us to say, remember how there was a bunch of that junk, right? Like we don't want, there's a problem loading comments right now, please try again later. We don't want all of this information. We can actually say, okay, anything after the section nums, we don't want. We're going to say that's garbage, so we're just going to throw it out. Okay, and what is this equal to? Well, this is equal to our export list. Right, we want to export this. Okay, great. So next thing, we got to make sure that we import re, right? Because imports are a thing, apparently. I don't know who even thought of that kind of stuff. Okay, next thing. Come on, guys, wake up. Next thing, we want to take care of the image separately. So image source. Now let's just put on our detective hats and find some images. Oh, wow, this guy's got a lot. Why take pictures on top of your bed, bro? Okay, so we can see that we have this div, and this div is called review image tile. It's within this review image container, which is a direct child of the customer review. So, okay, so that's great. So what we can do is we can say, okay, we want to find within that customer review tile, we want to find the image container. Within it, we're going to go down to the div, and we're going to go down to all of the children within that div, and we're going to take out the images. One way to do that is we can just say, okay, once we navigate to this image section, we can just go and find all of the images and then select the source because we want the source of the images. And that's actually going to give us an array, which is nice because we might have, again, there might be multiple images there and you might want to keep all of them to embed on our, for example, Shopify site. So we're going to go review.xpath. So how are we going to build this out? Well, we saw that it's okay. So we have that review div. So we're going to say, I want to go to the children and I want to go to which child in particular? The child where it contains an ID that has image section in it. Essentially, that's kind of like a regular expression. You could think of it like that as well. We're sort of combining both syntax here. And then I'm going to go down to the div. I don't need that div, right? That's going to be this div right here, right? And then I want to get all the images and then all their sources and sort of combine that. Images, and as we have the tag here, we have to use the @ symbol sources. And we're going to extract that. Okay, great. As you can see, we're not really writing a lot of code here because the XPath is so powerful that we can sort of navigate the page well. And once we do the response.follow, we're going to be able to navigate all 9 pages very quickly. It's a very, very efficient way to take care of this. Next thing is if image source. Then we're going to say export list dot append. Image source. Okay. If not, we're not going to put it in. Okay, great. So next thing. So here we're going to use some fancy syntax here using lists. So we're going to say export dict, and it just allows us to sort of iterate through both the export list and the headers, zip them up into an object, and create this sort of dictionary of dictionaries. and just export that. So sort of a key value pair. You're going to see that in a sec. So export dict.update. So here's a key value pair. So we're going to have header. We're going to have text. Okay. And where are we going to get the header and text from? We're going to get it for text header, right? In zip, which allows you to iterate through 2 arrays or multiple arrays simultaneously, right? Because this is going to give us access to a tuple, and the tuple is going to be the, for example, it might be the name, so Jeff, and then reviewer name, and then it might be 5 out of 5 stars and rating. So export headers. And yep, so headers there. Text, okay, great. And technically this sort of returns a list, but in this case, since we're updating a dictionary or mutating the dictionary, we don't have to collect the return value. And we're actually just going to now yield this export dict. It's great. So when it yields, then it knows, okay, which value is for which column, right? Because the dictionary is not necessarily sorted. So it's going to know, okay, it has to return a dictionary. That's going to be the row. And within the row, that's the way that you map value to column. That's great. We're going to yield that. And since it's a generator, we're also going to then clear out export dict. Export list. Okay. And again, since it's a generator, we can actually yield more than once. Yield statements are cool because they allow a function to sort of keep a general state. So we can yield a bunch of export dictionaries, but then we can yield a response object to then follow, right? To follow to the next page, which is really cool, right? For example, if we were to yield, say this function had yield true, right? And then maybe yield false, yield false. So generators are cool because I could just say parse, and that would originally return true. And then the next time I call it, if I just call it again, now it's going to return false. So in a sense, it's sort of, after it returned, it sort of kept at that state, and it'll keep at that state until the next yield value. So you could, in theory, implement a function with state, which is a very cool concept. All right, so the next thing we're going to do, and this is actually going to be the last thing, is we want to figure out, okay, we want to parse not just the single page, but all the pages. So we want to figure out the structure behind these buttons. And what we might see is okay, so we have this A and an href, and we see that it is the child of this list with class A last. Interestingly, the previous list doesn't have a class, but this one does. So that makes it great for us because we can easily target, get me the A with the href that is a child of the list with class A last. And what we're going to do, we could also do this with XPath, but because CSS selectors are more simple, we're going to use those. So we're going to say next page is equal to response.css, right? And what are we going to do, right? We're going to say, okay, we saw that it was a list of class A last, and I want to get the A tag, right? So we're going to go list dot A last, and we're going to then get me the child A tag, which is great. So in this case, since Scrappy, whenever you do a sort of response.css, response.xpath, it's always going to return a list, even if there's only one object, right? In this case, there's only going to ever be one next page on, or next page buttons on a given page. So what we actually have to do is we have to pass 0, right? Because there's only going to be one, and we don't want it to be a list. So we're going to do that. The next thing, which is cool, and also keep in mind that if we pass Scrappy this response.follow method, if we pass it a tag, it automatically knows to follow the href. So we don't have to then, extract the href from the a tag, which is very convenient. So next thing we're going to yield is we're going to yield the response dot follow. So it's going to then follow to the next page. And normally we could define a callback, but because the parse method is called automatically, we don't even have to do that, which is great. And at this point, we are done. That's it. Just very few lines of code, and it's going to be really, really powerful. So you guys are going to see that it's actually going to be quite awesome here. So we're going to exit the Scrappy shell. And what I'm going to do is I'm going to run this from the CLI, right? There's different ways you can do it. You could run a crawler process, and a crawler process might allow you to run multiple different spiders on one page. So, you know, you might define a instance of the Amazon spider and then just invoke it. So you can look at the documentation there. But what we're going to do is we're just going to use the command line. So we're going to go scrappy, crawl, Amazon. With output file, we're going to go reviews.csv. Okay. And we're going to watch the magic happen. Oh, so we get a 503 error. What does that mean? It means that the server doesn't like us. So we did give us something. We got MyRod, but that was it. So what does this mean? This means that either we were downloading from the site too quickly and it blocked us, or it realized that we were a bot. One way to sort of configure this is say, okay, we have these headers, and the headers, whenever you make a request to a website, you define your user agent. So for me, I'm running, this is a Linux machine, and I'm using Google Chrome. So if there is no user agent, Amazon just knows that this is a bot, right? In order to sort of fool Amazon into thinking we're actually a user, what we can do is we can go to this network section within the developer tools. And whenever we request a resource, we have response headers, right? And obviously the response. We also have request headers, and we can see, okay, this is the cookie that we have. It's a big cookie, making me hungry. And we also see what our user agent is, which is really cool. Obviously, we're not getting a 503 error when I'm doing it through browser, so I wonder if I were to do something cheeky like this and say, okay, so I know Amazon, you don't like bots, but I wonder if you like me, simple Christian, doing nothing but scraping comments. Okay, cool. So we just updated that file, and let's now run that again. So what's going to happen now? Oh, okay. So now we're good, right? So now this is able to scrape all of the reviews, and we can see our console going crazy. You can also turn this off. You can, this is logging. This is debug logging level. There's different logging levels. You can have like fatal logging levels, debugging, and this sort of shows you everything that's being parsed. So we're going to close that. It's like watching paint dry. There's so much information. Like, the cool thing about running it from the CLI is when we output, it actually appends onto a previously created CSV, so that, say I were to run it again, it's actually just going to put the data at the end. So we could just keep running it, which is great. So it doesn't corrupt the file. If we go to reviews.csv, we can see all the information here. And let's preview the table. Everything's going to seem great. Okay, right. Ratings, title, date, everything fantastic. Upvotes, and the image source. Okay. So yeah, that's everything that, we could ever really need, all the information. We got lots of stuff here. It all looks great. And yeah, that is everything for today.